All right, let's jump right into a puzzle that's at the very heart of our politics today. I mean, it feels like everyone is at war, right? Like nobody can agree on a single thing. But what if that's not exactly true? What if, when you get right down to what's actually broken, all the people fighting are right? It's a wild thought, but let's dive in.
So just let that question sink in for a second. What if the people who seem to hate each other most are all, in their own way, looking at the same sick patient, our society, and are just describing different symptoms of the very same disease? It sounds kind of weird, I know, but stick with me, because this idea might just unlock the whole mess.
So, to kick things off, let's look at this surprising common ground. Where do these political enemies actually agree? Well, as it turns out, it's the diagnosis.
Now, check this out, because this is where it gets really interesting. The progressive left, they see an oligarchy, a system rigged by structural inequality. The nationalist right, they're pointing at globalist elites who've hollowed out our industries. And the libertarian center, they're laser focused on regulatory capture and government getting way too big. Okay, they're all using different words, they've got different villains, but they're all painting the exact same picture. A system where power and wealth have become dangerously concentrated, totally unaccountable, and, yeah, corrupt.
You know, there's actually a name for this whole thing, horseshoe theory. The idea is that the political spectrum isn't a straight line, like we always imagine. It's shaped more like, well, a horseshoe. If you go far enough out to the left or far enough out to the right, the two ends start curving back towards each other. It's a perfect way to understand how a worker-first nationalist and a democratic socialist can end up sounding almost identical when they're criticizing the establishment.
So, let's follow this idea to its most extreme, and frankly, its most startling conclusion. We're about to look at a point where this convergence stops being about economics and starts being about something much, much older and way more intense. And to really see how far this goes, we have to look at what the source material calls the Hegseth-Wilson axis. Now, I want to be really clear. This isn't just two guys who happen to agree on some stuff. This is presented as a chosen intellectual lineage, a deliberate public partnership between a top government official, Pete Hegseth, and arguably the leading voice of a very aggressive Christian nationalism, a pastor named Doug Wilson. And Wilson's goals? Well, they're not subtle. They're crystal clear because he says them right out loud. Things like repealing women's right to vote, criminalizing homosexuality, turning the United States into an actual, explicit theocracy, and even defending historical American slavery as being consistent with the Bible. These are the stated goals of the ideology being actively platformed at the highest levels of our government. And this isn't just theoretical stuff, it's not just talk, this is action. Hegseth literally brought Wilson to the Pentagon to lead a worship service. And look at his own public symbols. He has a tattoo of the Jerusalem cross. He openly uses Deus Vult, which was the battle cry of the First Crusade. These are symbols of holy war, and they're being worn by a modern Secretary of Defense. So what's the result of all this? Well, get this. The Military Religious Freedom Foundation says they've gotten over 200 formal complaints. And these are coming from active duty service members, soldiers, sailors, airmen, who are deeply, deeply worried about this ideology spreading within their own ranks. And some of these complaints are honestly just chilling. Take this one from a non-commissioned officer talking about his commander. Now, the whole Armageddon in Iran part is obviously alarming, but the detail in this quote that the source argues is the most terrifying is that last line. He had a big grin on his face. This isn't just about belief anymore. This is a joy and exultation in the idea of total destruction. And this is where we come to the mirror. Just look at the structure here. On one side, you have this theocratic nationalism, and on the other, the radical Islamism it claims to be fighting. But functionally, they're identical. A divine mandate for war? Check. A political leader seen as chosen by God? Check. Viewing violence as a sacred tool? Check. They even use body iconography to signal their beliefs. They might be mortal enemies, but they are speaking the exact same apocalyptic language, a language that makes peace pretty much impossible. So that brings us to the big, crucial pivot point of this whole thing. If the people who say they're enemies start to look like mirror images of each other, then what is the real force that's driving all of this? The problem might not be political in the way we usually think about it at all. To find that deeper diagnosis, the source material we're looking at turns to a really ancient framework, the Buddhist concept of the three poisons. And these aren't just, metaphors for being a bad person. They're presented as the actual structural causes of suffering on every level. Let's start with the first one, lobha. which we translate as greed. But this goes so much deeper than just wanting more money or more stuff. It's that gnawing, deep down feeling of insufficiency. That constant feeling that you just don't have enough to be secure. It's a never-ending craving. Now, think about it. What happens when you build an entire economic system that runs on that exact feeling? Well, you get the oligarchic capture that both the left and the right are screaming about. The second poison is dosa, or anger. And again, this isn't just the emotion of being mad. It's an entire way of seeing the world. It's like a filter that sorts everything and everyone into threats and enemies. It's a mindset where every single problem has to have a bad guy, a culprit that has to be destroyed. Remember that crusader grin we talked about? Yeah, that's what dosa looks like when it thinks it has a permission slip from God. And finally, we get to the root poison of them all, moha, or ignorance. This is the big one. This is the core delusion. It's the belief that an external fix, a new law, a different president, a military victory, can somehow solve a problem that is fundamentally internal, a problem of the human mind. It's the huge mistake of trying to fix the world without ever stopping to look at the minds that are creating that world in the first place. So what happens when these internal states aren't just our personal flaws anymore, but they become the operating system for an entire society? Let's connect this framework right back to those political symptoms we started with.
You take lobha, greed, and what does it become on a national scale? Oligarchic capture. And this isn't some grand conspiracy. It's just basic cause and effect. A society that runs on endless craving will naturally concentrate power into the hands of the people who crave the most effectively. And what do they do with that power? They rewrite the rules to protect what they've got. Then you take dosa, anger. What does that turn into? It becomes the zero-sum tribalism we're all swimming in. Our entire media and political system runs on it. Outrage is the fuel, and the constant manufacturing of enemies both at home and abroad is the engine that just never, ever stops. And finally, moha, that fundamental ignorance, manifests as the great political delusion. This is the core belief that the next election, or the next war, or the next policy is going to finally be the one that fixes everything. It's the delusion that keeps us running on that political hamster wheel, forever treating symptoms because we're completely ignorant of the actual disease. So, wow, that is a pretty heavy diagnosis. You've got to ask, is there any hope? Is there a way out? The source material argues yes, there is. But the solution isn't political. It's about changing the very soil from which our world grows.
The path that's proposed is called the threefold training. First, you have sila, which is basically ethics, a simple baseline commitment to just stop causing harm. Second is samadhi, or meditation, and that's about developing the focus to actually see these poisons operating in our own minds in real time. And third, there's panya, or wisdom, which is the deep insight that these poisons aren't who we are, they aren't permanent, and that the mind can actually be transformed.
And this brings us to what might be the most crucial point of all. The institutions we build are nothing more than expressions of the minds that build them. It's that simple. So if you change the institutions without changing the minds, those same old patterns of greed and anger and ignorance will just rebuild the old broken systems right inside your shiny new ones. The internal work, it's not optional. It has to come first. Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought to sit with. We spend so much time and energy asking which political party, which policy, or which leader is going to save us. But what if that has always, always been the wrong question? What if the only question that has ever really mattered is this one? What kind of mind generates a world worth living in?